This was a closed-ended question, and it could have caused her to lose face. You could have reworded it and said, what are your workload limits?
James?
This comment is for both of you. Daniel, it started when you said, do you feel like your work should be reduced? And then I was mirroring him, Natalie. You then said, I feel like, right after he said it, and then both of you continued to use the word feel instead of think. Okay.
Natalie, it was effective to acknowledge why Daniel had called you in for this meeting and state that you took full responsibility for your actions and your behavior without being overly apologetic and repeating.
Daniel, when Natalie proposed to you something about hiring a new employee, you said, this is an option that we can consider. I would prefer that we not do that, though. It was effective because you didn't say, I hear you, but we're not going to do that.
Jenna?
Yeah, 2 cents.
Daniel, previously I mentioned an effective way to use an iMessage, and you handled this one ineffectively. You said, I felt annoyed by the way you handled that situation. It's not an effective way of owning your feelings without causing Natalie to lose faith, because you still place blame on her.
You can generalize that, and you can say, I felt annoyed because the situation wasn't handled appropriately. Then you're generalizing. But if you say the way you handled it, then you're causing the person to lose face.
Brittany?
Natalie, I noticed that you used a lot of limiting phrases, more specifically just, like you said, I just wanted to start off. I just want to know, you just.
Natalie, it was effective to not react whenever Daniel told you if your behavior did not change that you wouldn't be promoted, and you used the breakthrough strategy of don't react, go to the balcony.
I have a differing opinion from what Ryan said. When Daniel, you immediately turned down Natalie's option to hire someone else, even though you said that's an option, but I like to avoid it. You didn't give her any reasons why you like to avoid it, or ask her why she thinks it's a good idea to hire someone else.
It also says in sort of a passive-aggressive way that you're rejecting her statement about heavy workload. Because if you say it's an option, you're not providing her with any relief in terms of her situation. Okay, Daniel, you're the, Casey, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of long and then they kind of get it. Daniel, it was ineffective to refer to your notes during your opening statement, and it was also ineffective to undo your binder, shift papers, and take your pen during your opening statement.
Okay, and I was going to say, you're the boss, you shouldn't be reading your opening statement, all right? You know why you called the person in. How many people work in this office? What's your info sheet say? My memory, it's not necessarily good at my age, says I think it's a 7-person office, small office. Who's got their info sheet? Does it say that there anywhere? Okay, all right. Maybe it said that once upon a time. Tweaked it. But in a small office, if she knows that's the boss, then giving an employee a business card is not necessarily appropriate because that's the boss, all right? If you're working with outside vendors or salespeople, then it would be appropriate, but not necessarily unless you're in a large corporation, then you're in one section and somebody else is in a different section. Okay, watch out for things like great job. Now, could great job be appropriate? In the context to use it, it was an affirmation. And an affirmation is acceptable. An affirmation is not feedback, because what you're doing is you're praising the person. That's the difference, all right? You also need to differentiate, and I don't know off the top of my head if any of the additional negotiations are like that, but you want to differentiate between somebody's work, which is skill-based, and their behavior, which is not necessarily related to work. You could have somebody that's a very effective engineer that swears all the time in the work site, and then that results in a complaint of hostile environment because the person's swearing all the time, but he's a wonderful engineer. So you've got to be able to separate that when you talk to people. Now, Natalie, effective, and it's been mentioned, for you to take full responsibility And it was also very effective to say, what can I do to repair what's been done? Because that gets Daniel to disclose his expectations. Now, he asked several times about what option do you have, all right? But if her behavior is inappropriate, the option to correct the behavior has to come from him, not from her, all right? But Natalie was also very effective that you kept to the behavior issue and didn't dwell, as some people have in previous classes, on the promotion. Oh wow, what do I need to do to get rid? When you're getting your ass chewed for something, you want to accept responsibility and get out of there as quickly as possible. Because think of how, it just doesn't make sense. Somebody's calling you in to counsel you or discipline you, and you're saying, oh, by the way, I'm wondering, when I'm going to be considered for promotion. You probably could have been fired if you didn't react appropriately to being talked to about the behavior. So, Harry.
Yeah. It was short and sweet. You didn't drag it out, which was, I commend both of you for that. I will say that, let me look at my notes. Just put them away. I will say, Natalie, at the end of the negotiation, you effectively summarized what you heard from Daniel, and I thought that this was very effective in ensuring that you, I guess, acknowledged what he was saying.
Okay. Now notice, even after an entire semester, she's still got the lingo. All right, now, Dr. Olson calls that, I just forgot his word, but it's internalizing or incorporating it into your regular speech pattern. And he would tell you that it's significant to do that because then you start doing it automatically. So if you go to a job interview, you're not going to be saying to somebody, oh yeah, I'm really glad that you came up with the opportunity to see me, You're dead. All right? But it's very, very interesting because, as I mentioned to you, and Ari will reinforce this too, other faculty notice the difference in their classes. And you've probably now seen people do some presentations in your classes and you've said, OMG, what are they doing there? All right? Now, Dr. O would be the first to tell you that as a communication studies major, those of you that have that as a major, you can apply those skills regardless of what the area is that you're working in, whether it's sales or whether it's PR or whatever. And that's what makes the major significant. And for those of you that didn't know this trivia, it's now the second largest major in terms of numbers of students enrolled in the entire campus. For people that say, well, that's okay, but I have other skills too, and there are several of you in here that can do that. All right. And I noticed that we have a common buddy in Remy Kleinberg, right?
Mm-hmm. She's my advisor.
She's my boss for the graduate program. Dr. Olson also mentioned to me this morning that he suspected that after a semester off, I'd probably want to come back. I don't know. It depends on if there's no vodka and Kahlua in this town to keep me moving.
I'll call them right
My wife even suggested an alternative. She said, oh, honey, you're too old to be driving back and forth to Atlanta. All right? So maybe you should fly, stay down there for a couple of weeks, and then fly back. So she and my daughter have been talking about splitting the expenses of flying Papa back and forth.